Well, it's official. The Caitlyn Clark era is coming to an end at the University of Iowa. Caitlyn Clark declares for the WNBA Draft, and we know that we will see her for the final time in the regular season at Carver coming up this Sunday. We break it down today and for the future of Iowa women's basketball. Set the weekend ahead. All today, Locked On Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube. While you're there, hit the subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. This episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go for your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. Well, it was the news that many, myself included, thought was inevitable as it comes down yesterday that Caitlyn Clark has made her announcement that it is over. She will be departing for the WNBA. A lot of people making the connections back a little while ago when Indiana got the number one pick and, of course, freshman campaign for Aaliyah Boston, that we were going to see those two together. We saw them play in the Final Four a season ago as Iowa upended her undefeated South Carolina team and moved on to the championship game. And though that speculation had been out there, there were definitely two camps and two different beliefs of what Caitlyn Clark was eventually going to use in her COVID year, a bonus year of eligibility. You go back, and this is the last class that will have that COVID year available to them. Though they have played 4 seasons, they did not get a full season in their first year. Instead of the NCAA trying to navigate, this player actually got this many games, there was this many games missed because of COVID and those kind of things, they just said the heck with it. Let's simplify this as much as possible and give an extra year of eligibility also for not just the ones that had their season cut short in 2020 at the end of that one, but the 2020-21 season. Remember that one ultimately started with no fans in the stands, and you kind of look through, it's absolutely crazy. Caitlyn Clark was talking about this just a couple of weeks ago, that her first game in Carver Hawkeye Arena, there were 300 people in the stands. It was not even friends and family only that were allowed in that game. And then to see what this season has turned into and really what the last couple of years have been, sellouts all across the board this season in Carver Hawkeye and everywhere that she has been. Just some ridiculous crowd sellouts and what she has meant to women's basketball. And that's really where the conversation needs to begin today. And Caitlyn Clark has done so much for this sport. Not for the University of Iowa, the women's basketball program, Lisa Bluter and company. No, not just that. The sport as a whole. The sport of women's basketball. Not collegiate women's basketball, women's basketball, and the notoriety. And she's done it with swagger. She's done it with her style. And another thing that I love, and she brings this up a ton, but I think it's incredibly important, is Lisa Bluter, Jan Jensen, Fitz, the whole staff. They allowed Caitlyn Clark to be herself. And she brings that up a lot because you see her on the floor. You see the demeanor that she has. She is a hard worker. She is somebody that puts in all the time necessary. She is somebody that is demonstrative on the court, that will yell at officials, will yell at teammates, will yell at other players, even yell at people on the bench. Fans, she's there. She revs high. And yet with all those things and what you see on the floor, what she is away from the floor is a different kind of person. People describe her as a goofball, as aloof, a little bit different than what you'd anticipate with that kind of drive and that kind of tenacity. She is a different kind of person off the floor. And the Iowa staff allowed that to also marinate and to show that side of it. I told a story years ago when Caitlyn showed up on campus at the University of Iowa, and there were certainly some teammates at the time that were keeping her at arm's reach away, weren't exactly sure. Here comes this hot shot. She talks a lot. She's got a lot to say on the floor. She hasn't earned anything at the collegiate level. And some of the teammates weren't exactly sure. And she was able to very quickly indoctrinate herself into the program. It's never been a talent problem. There's never been a concern about her talent and her talent level. We saw that right away when she showed up in Iowa City. That's never been the question. It's those other parts. And if it's not handled correctly, those kind of things that she does on the floor, that can create friction. That can create problems. But the Iowa staff never allowed that to happen. Or if it was happening, was able to nip it in the bud very quickly. Credit to the staff for allowing her to be her. And also, when there were things that needed to be worked on, and there was plenty of those, and the way that she was on the floor and the way that she talked to officials and those kind of things, those are things that they needed to work on. They needed to massage and get to the level that it is today. Caitlyn Clark's not going to back down, and she's not going to back down to a challenge. And her next challenge is going to be at the WNBA after she finishes this season. We're going to take a big picture view of this and what it means for both the end of this season and looking forward to the next year for Iowa women's basketball, and taking this momentum that has been created and has continued to build over the last 4 seasons until what it is going forward, and a model that's perhaps sustainable. But let's get back to Caitlyn. And the question is out there a lot about the financial aspect of this. And I think it's missed by some people, even self-reported media people, sports business people like Darren Ravel. Said, oh, he's leaving money on the table by leaving. And it's short-sighted. In fact, it's quite dumb. All of a sudden, State Farm's not going to say, yep, we're good. We don't need her anymore. She's not going to be dropping. The Iowa NIL Collective, the Swarm Collective, donate to the Swarm, by the way. They've not given a dime to Caitlyn Clark. She has done this all with her own endorsements. And the money that is out there, and some of the estimates that are out there, On3 does a lot of that. One of the recruiting websites, Tom Kaker's Board Hawkeye Report. And this isn't a knock on Tom, it's just On3. I think the reporting that they have in terms of what she's getting financially is incredibly short. I think they are not even close to actually what it is and the actual number that Caitlyn Clark is receiving this season. But to think that Nike is going to go away, that we're going to see Goldman Sachs say, nope, we're done. It's so short-sighted. It's just not reality. I also believe that there is a part of this, as we go back to the conversation we heard from Cheryl Swoops, when she's talking about, well, she's in her 5th year. We know that's wrong. That she gets the extra year, the extra games. But she didn't want that to be part of the legacy. Because coming back for another season, obviously she destroys every record that's out there. And there is nobody that's ever going to be able to come close to her again. Because the opportunity and the reality that we're going to have another worldwide pandemic in the next few years is not real high. At least in our lifetimes. How about that? The likelihood doesn't seem very plausible that we're going to have something like COVID-19 that's going to happen again and negate an NCAA tournament and lead to a weird year after that. It just doesn't seem like that's really something that's going to be happening again. At least I hope so. Let's hope we don't have to go through that again in our lifetimes. I think that was also important to her. Doing it in 4 years, not having that extra year, to have that asterisk, to have just that little demerit next to her name. Do it in 4 years like the other greats did and go out that route. Now, could there be a chance that she'd come back and ultimately decide to come back to Iowa? I think it's such a small glimmer that it's not even worth talking about. She made the announcement. She did it in her way. The question now becomes, why now? We'll get into that. Why does Caitlyn Clark make this announcement before we even finish up the regular season? Isn't this something better served for when they lose in the NCAA tournament, or eventually move on and win the whole thing and win 6 games and cut down the nets for a national championship in Cleveland? Why now? We'll tackle that as we continue. Plus, we get ready for the weekend ahead in Iowa basketball. A big one for the women, obviously, as they finish up the regular season. They get the second-ranked Buckeyes coming to town. We'll break that one down. And a monster opportunity for the Iowa men. They go to Northwestern. A win would be another quad 1 victory for them and potentially put them in to the NCAA tournament. We'll talk about that as we continue here. Plus a big weekend for Iowa baseball. We continue. Caitlyn Clark, though, dominating the conversation as she declares for the WNBA Draft. We talk about that as we roll through here. Locked On Hawkeyes. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is the perfect city driver, and great escapes. Class exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and the Google Play Store are built right in to the 12.3-inch HD touchdown infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. How about the 2024 Nissan Armada? You will what you expect, a full-size SUV. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. Tow bigger and explore further in the 2024 Armada. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop at NissanUSA.com. That's NissanUSA.com. Trent Condon back with you again here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Your team every day. That's what we do here across the Locked On network. Back to Caitlyn Clark. And why not? Why make this announcement before we get through the regular season, before the NCAA tournament, or after the season comes to a close? Why the timing of this one? Although this has been lingering for a while, we're seeing the continued dissenting opinions that have been out there, including right here in my house. My wife thought I was dead wrong, that she was going to be departing. I tried to explain with her with reason why she would be off to the WNBA, but we are not alone in those conversations. They were happening, and they were also being chanted in arenas. Over the last couple of weeks, more and more chants of one more year towards the end of basketball games were starting to rain down towards Caitlyn Clark. People wanting to see her for one more season, one more go around, one more tour of the Beatles, if you will, for this Iowa women's basketball team. But making the decision here and doing it now is absolutely perfect. First, those questions that have been lingering out there, and certainly would have been things that have been asked to Caitlyn Clark over the next couple of weeks and the next month, were going to be something that we're going to be talked about a lot. You take that off the board. You just move away. You put this announcement out here. But I think also more importantly, you look towards Sunday and the regular season finale against Ohio State. Though there's still the Big Ten tournament in front of them, and a win would solidify Iowa as the number 2 seed. Not a huge difference between the number 2 and number 3 seed, but avenging the loss against Ohio State, that's huge. She was going to go through senior day ceremonies already. It's something that she had already said, something that had already been stated, that she was going to go through the senior day ceremonies, and we were going to see her go through that, even if a decision at that time hadn't been made. But we know what it would have been. It would have felt odd, right? It would have felt off if she was going through that with that lingering doubt that was still there. Another thing, speaking of those chants that are out there, one more year, we would have heard that. As she's not just going through senior day ceremonies by herself. There will be other important cogs that'll also be hearing their name called and getting all the pomp and circumstance that goes along with it during those senior day ceremonies. It's going to be Gabby Marshall. And we've talked about Gabby a ton here lately. And great to see her against Minnesota be able to break out, knock down some threes. And not only that, go to the rim a couple of times, do some things, get to the paint and make some shots inside, and becoming more than just a defender on the outside, being that 3-and-D player that she is and knocking down those shots. Kate Martin, they call her the glue, and there's a reason for it. She does everything. She holds it all together. Defensive end, offensive end, shooting, getting to the rim, rebounding, coming up with a big pass. You name it, she does it. She's incredibly important. She'll be going through the ceremony as somebody that used, along with Gabby Marshall, their final year of eligibility with the bonus year for the COVID eligibility and going through it one final time. And even Molly Davis, though Molly's only been here for a couple of years, transferring in from the MAC 2 seasons ago, she'll also be going through it and taking away maybe that odd aspect for the players that she's gone to battle with, the players that have been incredibly important to this program. It's not just Caitlyn Clark. And as we've seen plenty of times throughout her career, she can't do it alone. She can do a ton, and she can put this team on her back, and she's done it in so many times throughout the course of her career. But it can't be by herself, and that's something that's going to be good. And the question also, which I think is just silly, does her game translate to the next level? I mean, come on. It's absolutely silly. Now, is she going to average 32 points and 9 assists a game as a rookie? Probably not. Not even probably not. She won't. It's not going to happen. But to think that she can't translate, we're not talking about some diminutive guard. I'm talking about Jackie Stiles, trying to get to the next level. We're talking about a 6-foot point guard in the women's game with incredible quickness, off the bounce shooting, the deep shots that she's able to hit, and one of the best playmakers that you're going to find in college basketball. And you don't think that can translate? I mean, it's just such a silly question. It just leaves me shaking my head. How can that even be a question? Yep, for some people, it is. Are there going to be better defenders? Absolutely. Guess what? Everybody has to go through that. It was one thing to see Monica Czinano very quickly out of the WNBA. It's difficult. There's only 12 teams. The roster spots are limited. You're talking about the best of the best. And we're not talking about a 30-team NBA. We're not talking about a roster that goes 13, 14, 15 deep with a developmental league like there is in the NBA. That's not the case here. You have to be the best of the best. But Caitlyn Clark is one of the best of the best. And she's going to go into a situation where there's still going to be growing pains. It's going to be a young team that's still going to be learning together. But it is a perfect opportunity for her to go to Indiana and play at an incredibly high level, play with a star already, and Aaliyah Boston. And I think they're going to hit the ground running, and it's going to be an exciting year. The WNBA themselves needs to capitalize on this. I mean, this is something where every Caitlyn Clark game needs to be televised. I know they have a contract with ESPN, also CBS Sports Network. I mean, they got to be doing everything possible to get each and every one of those games out there. The first game of her career, if she is selected, when she's selected, number 1 by Indiana, is against New York. Star power there, obviously New York. How huge is that? The schedule's already out. You already look at it, and you know there's going to be a whole lot of Caitlyn Clark that's going to go. Now the WNBA has to be able to translate, and they need to find a way to get all the people that have jumped into women's college basketball over the last couple of years. They need to find a way to get them over to the WNBA and watching those games and enjoying their product and getting out there and watching the traveling circus that is Caitlyn Clark and being able to see her on person, all those different things. They need to do that. That is number 1. Now, I'm sure their marketing department is already working on that, and there's a lot that needs to be done to get to that level and to be able to capitalize on what they've had. This is something we haven't seen. We have not seen a transcendent star like this in any sport since Tiger Woods. And it's not hyperbolic. It isn't. We have not seen that level. And in fact, I did this exercise a couple of weeks ago. And I went back and looked at the television ratings for Tiger Woods. And they obviously grew immensely. But I just went back and looked at the Masters. And when he won that first Masters in the mid-90s, 97, that he won the first one. And it ballooned that season, even as he was run away from the competition. And it led to a bump in golf ratings and the Masters on a year-on-year basis. And when he was in contention, obviously it went up even more. But we're not talking about a sport that was unwatched. We're not talking about a sport that was struggling in terms of television viewers. The Masters before that was still getting 12, 13, 14 million viewers. Even single digits, 7, 8, 9, on a yearly basis. But you got nerds like Tom Kite out there winning majors, and people are watching. Tiger Woods, though, built this sport and took it to a new level. Caitlyn Clark has taken a sport that was a niche of a niche and has developed it into an absolute rating bonanza. Who's the most valuable athlete in college athletics? It's not Caleb Williams. It's Caitlyn Clark. It's not Zach Edey. It's Caitlyn Clark. That's what she has done. This is not an Iowa thing. This is a nation thing. This is a world thing. Caitlyn Clark is a star unlike anything that we have seen at the collegiate level in the last few decades. This is something that is so different than anything that we've seen in the past in most anybody's lifetime of what this is built into. It's amazing. Now the WNBA has to translate it and lead it into being a viable entity. What can it lead to going forward? That's a big question. What does it lead to going forward now for Iowa women's basketball and the future of that? Well, we mentioned the departing seniors as 4 players will hear their name called on Sunday against Ohio State. Gabby Marshall, Caitlyn Clark, Molly Davis, and Kate Martin. They will all move on. So you bring back a core that includes Sydney Fulter. Anybody that's an everydayer, you know my affinity for a Fulter. Love the way that she plays, the tenacity that she has on the boards, the skill set that she has. Feuerbach, if it continues at this level, working her way back off the injury, she can shoot it. She's got some skill off the bounce. Really good piece there. You got the 3 centers all coming back, and they'll be seniors next year with A.J. Edinger, Sharon Goodman, and Addison O'Grady. All 3 of them will be back for another season. Taylor McCabe continues to show her ability to shoot the basketball. Hannah Stuelke, obviously, will be a junior next season. We know just how good Hannah is. Jada Jimphy hasn't clicked yet. Will it as she becomes an upperclassman? We'll see. The Johnston product. And then the 2 freshmen this year with Kenise Johnson, seen her a little bit, and obviously Ava Jones. And, the likelihood that Ava is going to play competitive level basketball again seems incredibly slim, but she's still on scholarship. She's not taking a medical hardship, because if she does that, once you make that medical hardship, your playing career is over. And that's why it's so difficult for players to hang it up. And I know, and I can imagine that Ava wants to get out there in a competitive environment at minimum one more time to give it a shot. We'll see about that. But they are full for next season. They bring in a recruiting class of 5 players. 4 of them are top 100 players. Now, we're not talking about any elite blue chip type of players. The closest to that would be Aaliyah Guyton, but she tore her ACL here, a month or 2 back? Excuse me. So she likely not going to be ready at minimum for the start of next season, working her way back from the ACL. Big post player coming in as well from out in Oregon, as they'll bring in Ava Hayden. I know there's a lot of excitement there. Many services have her as a top 50 player nationally. I think ESPN has her at number 40 nationally, and there's a blue chip type coming in for next season. Who's going to be the guards, though? Is it Sterlo, another freshman coming in? Who's going to run the point? Do they play around with scholarships and try to figure that out? Iowa can be a destination. Iowa went shopping this past year. Weren't able to get anything. And they looked for some post players. And they tried to find the right fit to come in. And they went after Ware and a couple others, and ultimately that didn't happen. But what does Iowa do there? Because it does feel like they need that playmaker, that facilitator. And there's not going to be another Caitlyn Clark. And maybe transfer players don't want to come in and have to deal with that, right? Have to have those kind of questions and that kind of pressure that'll be on the next point guard for Iowa basketball. But that is a look towards the future and what they have coming in. Going to be interesting. And those freshmen now know they will not be playing with Caitlyn Clark. The weekend ahead, we talked a little bit about the Ohio State matchup. Looking forward to that. We'll give you some thoughts on the matchup against the Buckeyes, the Iowa men. Huge spot as they get ready to face off against Northwestern. And Iowa baseball travels south once again. This time it is a 3-game series against Ole Miss. We'll talk about the weekend ahead here as we continue Locked On Hawkeyes. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams. They have quick bets. Jump in there right away. They got them set up for you. Live same-game parlays. We talk about same-game parlays before the game. As the game is happening, you're watching it unfold. You can jump in with live same-game parlays. They have exclusive props, a great futures menu, and a whole lot more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. As always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. As we wrap things up, a look to the weekend ahead, let's kick things off with some Iowa men's basketball and a matchup against Northwestern. Now, this will be the only meeting between the Hawkeyes and the Wildcats. It'll be over in Evanston. Yes, I understand that Northwestern earlier this year somehow inexplicably lost to Chicago State. That's right. One of the few independent teams left in college basketball, and still scratching your head about that. But since then, in Big Ten play, they have beat all comers. They have played at an incredibly high level throughout the course of this season at home, beating Purdue, getting the win against them. Earlier in the season, they got a win against Dayton that you see in the top 25 throughout the course of this season. They beat everybody in the Big Ten: Michigan State, Maryland, Illinois, Ohio State, Nebraska, Penn State, and Michigan, all at home. And now here come the Hawkeyes on Saturday, late afternoon. Northwestern is projected to be a 4-point favorite in this game. That is the line currently at Ken Pomeroy. So what needs to happen? What do you need to do? Well, in the past, it's just talking about the backcourt. And though, unfortunately, Boo Buie, for Iowa standards, is still around because he is an absolute terror in what he can do with the basketball, an ability to shoot the ball incredibly well from the outside, 41% from downtown. Assist rate, his assist rate is in the top 75 in the country. Again, we're talking about 350 teams with 13 players per team. Yeah, that's how good he is. An incredible offensive talent. He's got size. He's got speed. 6'2", a point guard with some power behind it. Boo Booey, he's just really good. Now, what I was going to try to do to contain him, what that means defensively and what they do in the matchup. The good news, though, is Ty Berry is not going to be there. And he has been another one of those players that's just so good, another shooter from the outside. So we've seen a little bit more. It's Heiser, who last year, there's one of the games against Iowa, he just went off against the Hawkeyes. Langborn has been playing more with the injury to Berry. We've seen him. Martinelli's another guy, 6'7", that can step out and shoot the ball from the outside. They just got a myriad of different ways that they can beat you offensively. Nicholson, a 7-footer inside. There's another guy. Seems like he's had some good games last season during his freshman campaign against the Hawkeyes. Look, they're good. They've been really solid this year, but they're also not unbeatable. And I love the way this Iowa team is playing right now. I love the tenacity that they've shown, the bounce back factor that they've had, how many times we've left them for dead this season, and they've been able to bounce back. And Tony Perkins can't afford to get in foul trouble. And you need good Tony Perkins, certainly in a matchup like this. You need him on the defensive end, cause some problems against Bowie, maybe get a steal or two, do those kind of things, frustrate him, yet also do it by staying out of foul trouble. You're going to need him. Obviously, what Iowa's been able to do inside. Owen Freeman, another guy that has to stay out of foul trouble. We know how good it is. But lately, it's come down to Peyton Sanford. And in a game, going back to the triple-double against Penn State, that he didn't shoot it incredibly well, he still was able to impact the game with the assist, getting the ball to Josh Dix. And if we see the Josh Dix that we've seen over the last couple of weeks, for the most part, Iowa's going to have an opportunity here. And that's all you can ask for. We go to the final two games with Iowa with the chance to win. Now, if you don't get one of these final two, both of the final two, you're going to have to beat Illinois at some point. It's just going to happen. You have to beat them the regular season. Might have to beat them again in the Big Ten tournament, because it's looking more and more likely that they could see them in the quarterfinals. If Iowa is the 7 seed, that means going 1-1 likely here down the stretch. You're probably going to see Illinois again if you win that opening game as a 7 seed against the 10, and the 2 seed waiting for you in the quarterfinals will be those Illini. So that is what is ahead for men's basketball. Looking forward to that, and we'll recap things as we always do here on Locked On Hawkeyes. The women's game, couldn't be more excited for it. The revenge angle, Caitlyn getting knocked down, making her way off the floor, just how Iowa collapsed in the fourth quarter. You saw an incredible performance out of Ohio State. You have to give credit to them for coming back in that game, what Cody was able to do. She was so good in the post. I think I was going to have a different type of game plan for her. It was a lot of just putting Hannah out there on an island. They threw a couple other bigs, and it didn't matter who they were throwing on her. She was able to get the ball in the high post, turn, and get to the rim, get buckets, 3-point plays. It was all over the place. The environment, though, I can't imagine. We know that ticket prices are through the roof. I'm going to guess after the announcement yesterday from Caitlyn Clark, they're going to be even higher, knowing that this, yes, officially will be her last regular season game. There will be 2 games in the NCAA tournament in Carver. Getting tickets for that will also be incredibly difficult, but we do know what that's going to be like, and so looking forward to what we're going to see on Sunday at noon. And then the Iowa baseball team, after not a devastating week a week ago, but incredibly disappointing, getting swept down in Jacksonville, losing to Auburn, Virginia, and Wichita State. Felt like going in, if they could go 2-1, really solidify themselves, not just as an NCAA tournament team, but a team that can potentially host a regional. You lose all 3 of those games, and now you're playing a whole lot from behind. Ole Miss is off to a slow start this year, but boy, Coach Heller's got to figure out the bullpen. And doing that, another one that's easier said than done, figuring out what the bullpen and the right pieces there. Got the win earlier in the midweek game against Northern Illinois, but this is another step up. It's an SEC team. You're playing them on the road. You got the starting pitching set up. How much more are they going to stretch them out? It's still early in the season as we flip the calendar here to March, and a long ways to go. You don't want to do too much, but an important one. You go down there, you win 2 out of 3. I think you're feeling right back on track of things. And though Ole Miss might not be an NCAA tournament team this season, that kind of quality, getting a road series victory against Ole Miss, I think would go a long ways at minimum to getting Iowa back, feeling good about being an NCAA tournament team. That's what we got coming up on the weekend ahead. As we look through here, a little wrestling news as well as the coaching rankings came out. We'll talk about those early next week as we get ready for the Big Ten Wrestling Tournament. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Greatly appreciate each and every one of you out there. Want to let you know also Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. We'll be back with you on Monday after the weekend, a recap of everything going on in the world of Hawkeyes. Your team every day, that's what we do here on the Locked On Network, and thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again Monday. Go Hawks.